Do you remember a time long, long ago when fans would actually beg studios to make prequels to their favorite movies? When internet forums were full of theories about what happened before the original story? When everyone was convinced that showing the backstory of a popular character would finally answer all the questions they'd been dying to know? Well, guess what? Hollywood listened, and then proceeded to destroy almost every single one of those beloved franchises with prequels that managed to disappoint everyone on every single level. These are the prequels that fans demanded for years, only to realize the truth. Sometimes the best prequels are the ones that never, ever, ever get made. You're gonna want to stick around till the end because I saved the best for last. Oh yeah, and fair warning, major spoilers ahead. Prometheus and Alien Covenant, the prequel nobody liked to explain the other prequel that nobody understood. In 1979, Ridley Scott created one of the greatest horror films ever made with Alien. And for decades, fans wondered about the mysterious space jockey and where the xenomorphs came from. What was the story behind that crashed alien ship? And who exactly created these perfect killing machines? So in 2012, Scott finally gave fans their answer with Prometheus. And the answer was confusing philosophical nonsense about engineers who wanted to destroy humanity for reasons that were never really properly explained. And then the movie gave audiences one of the strangest characters in sci-fi history. David, an android character played by Michael Fassbender, who spent his time learning ancient languages, playing the flute, and developing a really creepy obsession with one of the crew members. He wasn't just weird, he was uncomfortable to watch. His awkward attempts at understanding humanity came off less like artificial intelligence and more like a serial killer practicing emotions in front of a mirror. And then you had supposedly highly intelligent scientists making decisions so dumb that audiences didn't know whether to laugh or start planning a class action lawsuit for emotional damage. Characters took off their helmets on alien planets. They got lost even though we had just seen them using very sophisticated high-tech mapping equipment. They petted strange creatures that didn't look remotely cute or friendly. And these were the same scientists we just saw be absolutely freaked out over a 1,000-year-old corpse, a corpse that posed no harm. Yet they were almost immediately delightfully fascinated by a visibly hostile alien creature. Then you had to sit through the agony of watching characters who thought the best way to escape a massive rolling object was to run in a straight line in the exact direction it was rolling towards, instead of, simply moving a few feet to the left or right, or at the very least run away from it at a right angle. By the end, it was honestly hard to root for anyone, and you just wanted them all to die and get a refund for your ticket. Prometheus cost $130 million and made $403 million worldwide. Not terrible numbers, but fans were so disappointed that Scott felt that he had to make another prequel to explain his prequel. That movie was called Alien Covenant, and somehow it made things so much worse. Alien Covenant arrived in 2017, promising to fix everything Prometheus got wrong. Scott swore up and down that this time he would deliver the xenomorph action fans wanted, while also continuing his philosophical story about creation and artificial intelligence. But the result was a movie that proved two wrongs don't make a right, especially when fans told you to stop after the first one. Horror fans didn't get enough alien scares. Philosophy fans got shallow, pretentious dialogue. And everyone had to watch Michael Fassbender play two androids who kissed each other while quoting poetry. Made for around $100 million, Covenant only earned $241 million. And the franchise that Scott created had now been killed by Scott himself, with not one, but two prequels. Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning, when economic hardship became a valid excuse for cannibalism. The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, from 1974, was raw, truly terrifying, and left audiences with nightmares for weeks. Because people just weren't used to horror that was that realistic in the 70s. The power of the original came from how random and senseless the violence felt. A group of kids stumbled into the wrong house and faced pure evil with no explanation or logic. And that amount of unpredictability made the whole thing genuinely horrifying. But in 2006, New Line Cinema decided to make Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning, a prequel showing how Leatherface became a killer and how his family became cannibals. The answer involved an abusive childhood, a meat processing plant closing down, and a lot of unnecessary backstory that made Leatherface less scary instead of more. The prequel tried to make you understand why this family turned to murder and cannibalism, as if unemployment benefits not covering rent was a valid reason to start eating tourists. And the movie itself was just torture without purpose, explaining details that nobody really needed. I mean, sometimes a guy with a chainsaw is scarier when you don't know his whole life story. But what made the original Leatherface as a concept and character work so well was that he was unknowable. He was a force of nature, almost superhuman, not a character with motivations you could analyze. By giving him a sympathetic backstory, the prequel accidentally explained away the mystery and made him a lot less interesting because now he was no longer scary, just pathetic. Made for $16 million, The Beginning earned $51 million worldwide. Not a complete flop because of its relatively low production budget, but the movie was such a bland, generic slasher film that it might as well have gone straight to DVD. The Thing 2011, the prequel that killed the patient it was supposed to save. John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982 became a cult classic about paranoia and body horror in Antarctica. The original became legendary for creating genuine paranoia where you couldn't trust anyone. For years, fans wondered what happened at the Norwegian camp before the events of the movie. And in 2011, Universal gave fans their answer with a prequel also called The Thing. And it turned out the answer was exactly what you'd expect. People found an alien, the alien killed them, the end. It was a prequel that existed only to exist and offered absolutely nothing new. The same isolated location, same paranoia about who's infected, same flamethrowers and blood tests, but without any of the tension or creativity that made Carpenter's version work. The characters were forgettable, the scares were predictable, and the whole movie felt like a cheap imitation instead of a worthy predecessor. Carpenter's film worked because it was about paranoia and trust breaking down. The prequel was just about an alien killing people in the most boring ways. It answered the mystery of the Norwegian camp by basically showing us there really wasn't a mystery, and instead gave us a generic monster movie that happened before the good movies started. Cost $38 million. Gross $31 million worldwide. It was such a complete failure that it killed any hope of continuing the franchise. Pan 2015. A prequel so confusing, it made growing up seem like the better option. J.M. Barrie created Peter Pan over a century ago as a boy who never grows up, living in Neverland with pirates, fairies, and lost boys. But for decades, some of his hardcore fans were curious about the origin story. I mean, how did Peter Pan get to Neverland in the first place? And what exactly made him decide to never grow up? Well, in 2015, Warner Brothers gave fans their answer with Pan, directed by Joe Wright. And the answer involved Hugh Jackman as a singing pirate named Blackbeard, flying ships powered by pixie dust, and Nirvana songs being sung by slaves in a fantasy world. The movie tried to explain Peter Pan's backstory while also being a blockbuster action-adventure, and it failed at both. The film was a visual mess that couldn't decide if it wanted to be dark and gritty or colorful and whimsical. It cast Rooney Mara as Tiger Lily, which created its own controversy. Why? Well, because Rooney Mara looks like this, instead of looking like the original character who looks like this. Make of that what you will. Then came the worst plot twist. Peter and Hook were childhood friends, which kind of ruins the entire dynamic of their relationship in the original story. Nobody needed to know that Hook was once a good guy or that Peter's mother was a fairy princess. Made for $150 million, Pan earned only $128 million worldwide. It was one of the biggest bombs of 2015 and killed any plans for a Peter Pan cinematic universe. Peter Pan was supposed to be about the magic of childhood and refusing to grow up. But this prequel made growing up seem like the much better option. Hannibal Rising, when your monster's sob story becomes more unwatchable than his murders. Thomas Harris terrified readers for decades with 4 incredible Hannibal Lecter novels and his 1991 movie adaptation called Silence of the Lambs. The film was a massive hit and became an instant cult classic that gave us some of cinema's most quotable dialogue. But the movie deliberately left audiences hanging on one detail. Why and how exactly did a brilliant psychiatrist become a cannibalistic serial killer? Hannibal Rising arrived in 2007 to answer those questions, and the answer was that young Hannibal watched Nazis eat his sister during World War II, which apparently explains why he eats rude people with fancy wine decades later. The movie tried to make audiences empathize with Hannibal by showing his tragic childhood, but instead, it just made him boring. What made Hannibal Lecter terrifying was his mystery. He was sophisticated, intelligent, and completely unpredictable. You never knew why he chose his victims or what made him the way he was. That unknowable quality made him fascinating. But Hannibal Rising stripped all that away and replaced it with a generic revenge story about a traumatized kid who grows up to kill the people who wronged him. But here's the thing. Audiences did not want to feel sorry for him. They wanted to be terrified by him. By explaining everything, the movie explained away all the things that made the character work. Made for $50 million, Hannibal Rising earned $82 million worldwide, which is actually a loss when you factor in marketing and distribution costs. But the financial loss was nothing compared to what happened critically, because the movie was torn apart. And even die-hard Hannibal fans still try to pretend this movie doesn't exist.